their own selves. It is possible to be set free and to enslave yourself. It is possible to be set free and enslave yourself through drugs. Enslave yourself in sexuality. Enslave yourself in consumption. Enslave yourself in self-centeredness. Have you become free and turned back around and enslaved yourself? You're at a crossroads, sisters and brothers. You are free to choose a life of authority and empowerment to advance God's kingdom, to live a life of compassion, mercy, and justice, to be a vehicle of transformation, to be a vehicle of God's love. Or you can choose a new kind of slavery, freely, and live your life in the flesh. To think you're about justice, but you're really about you. To think you're about compassion, but you're really about you. To think you're about mercy, but you're really about you. Let's break this down by going to the second point. The first point was freedom in Christ. The second point is when you're free in Christ, you are freed to love. Free to love. Verse 14 of Galatians 5 says this: for the whole law is fulfilled in one word, in the statement, you shall love your neighbor as yourself. We were all slaves to sin, slaves under the law. We were slaves to this. Christ comes and takes the shackles, takes the stocks, takes the traps of the law and wickedness and sin off of us and sets us free to do what? To love. Paul says what Jesus said. You can sum all of the law to this: love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength, and love your neighbor as yourself. We can live a life of corruption, a life of the law. We can live the life of compassion, the life of love. We have a free choice here today. You have a free choice to choose between the life of corruption and law or the life of compassion and love. You are free to live a life of authority and power and empowerment to advance God's kingdom. This is a life in the Spirit. This is life in God's love. But here is the tricky part about this, because it says here in verse 13 as it closes out, but through love serve one another. Love. What does this word love mean? It means it's agapeo. Agapeo in the Greek means, and I've said this before, if you hang out here on a regular basis, this means to be loved and to be loving simultaneously. It is not possible to live by the flesh, to live in sin, and to embrace God's love and to love other people simultaneously. You'd have to live by the Spirit to live that way. But if we live in the flesh, it's not possible. So when we are set free in Christ, we are set free to love other people. Because when we're enslaved to sin and wickedness and brokenness and addiction, we're not loving anybody. We're not even loving ourselves. But we're set free in Christ to love others. To experience at great depth a love affair with God. But to love others. A life of compassion is a life of loving others, but also serving others. But do you understand in the Greek what this word serve means? It means to voluntarily become a slave. Now wait a minute. I thought Christ set us free. Yes, he does. Well, what do you mean that servant means slave? It does. It means to volunteer. The life of compassion, mercy, and justice means you have the freedom and the authority and the empowerment to serve at the feet of the lost and the broken. I'm concerned that so many people have taken the position of looking at lost and broken people, broken systems, and have become judges. So we judge people that don't have the same GPA we had when we graduated, if we were 4.0 or 3.0. We judge schools if those schools aren't the way the school was that we graduated from. We judge neighborhoods if those neighborhoods aren't like the neighborhood we grew up in. We judge families if those families aren't like our family was. We judge kids if kids aren't the way we were when we were a kid. And so we sit at the seat of judgment. And this is another form of slavery. We are not set free to judge. We are set free to love. And this love, if it's God's love, is transformative love. It's a love that causes you to love your neighbor. I've told this story before, but I have a neighbor on my block. I'm not going to say his name, but the neighbor. And when that neighbor first moved on my block, I judged him. I judged him because of his tattoos. I judged him because of the way he dressed. I judged him because of his motorcycle. I judged him. I was wondering how, this is sad, I was wondering how he being in my neighborhood was going to affect the value of my neighborhood, the value of my house, the value of my block. That's what I did. The pastor, the Christian, the one who's preaching compassion, mercy, and love. Now don't look at me like you don't do this. Don't look at me like you don't judge people on your block, at your job, at your school, at the mall, at the gas station. Stop playing me. You do. Our default button for living is judgment. It's hard work. It takes discipline to love and not judge. And if you're not judging broken people, you're judging people you go to church with. You're judging people you should be extending forgiveness to. You're judging somebody. Somebody is getting the gavel from you. Boom, guilty. Right? Somebody. Dave one day comes, and I said his name now. See, there's Dave. God, I should have drank more coffee this time. We'll call him Dave. So he comes to my house because they've got a tree that grows fruit in the backyard. And he said, "Did you know this tree out here between our houses grows fruit?" I said, "No." And he said, and so my girlfriend made homemade jelly. I was like, "Oh, that's great." He said, "So we brought you some." He said, "Hey, can I ever help out for you or anything like that?" I was like, "No, not really, but good to meet you." And I found out later that he has, I call it a ministry. He wouldn't call it that. I don't know if he's a believer. Now we're on the journey of finding all that out, but I found out his life's work is to help people come out of addiction and alcoholism and find work and find new purpose in their life. Here's a guy not even in church extending more compassion and mercy than the guy in church. Now you can act like this is just my problem. But Dave has become a wonderful friend. Wonderful friend. I'm going to miss him when I move from here. I pray and hope in the new place I live, I get a neighbor like Dave. Because not only do I want a neighbor like Dave because of who he is, but because of what that experience did for me. It caused me to realize I'm not as loving as I thought I was. I'm not as compassionate as I thought. I still have issues. I still need God to crucify stuff in me. That I might live a life of compassion. That I might be salt and light on my block, in my neighborhood, wherever I go. That I might live a life of compassion, that I am extending God's love into the world. What about you? Is this just me? We are free to love, to live life in the Spirit. Agapeo, agapeo. This word, you cannot be loving if you are not living in God's love for you. We can say all we want. I want to be compassionate and loving in North Minneapolis, in Honduras, in Africa, in my neighborhood, at my job. The best way to become a loving person is to live daily in God's love for you. If we skip a day not exploring deeply God's love for us, it will hinder our ability to be loving on that day.